Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of Booked, a place to explore the realms of creativity. Today's guest is SC Vincent. Thank you so much for joining me today. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thank you for coming. It's always so exciting to talk to another writer because everyone's so different, and getting to read this wide range of different types of writing, especially self-published books, are just another realm because they're either unhinged or there's just all sorts of stuff going on, or it just bends genres and you can't put people into boxes. And after reading the Sakura Element, I can tell you for now, this breaks a lot of molds. And there's just such a good variety of like different things. I couldn't possibly put it in one category. It's fantastic. So thank you for writing it. It
Thank
was a
you for
very
reading it.
interesting read. Of course, it's a pleasure. The exciting part about getting to meet all these indie writers is that I wouldn't necessarily have picked a book like this on purpose because I like gory, gross books. But I was pleasantly surprised. It was good. Um, so I could keep gushing all day, but this is for you. It's not for me. And I always get overexcited at the beginning of an interview. It must be that nervous energy. Um, so, for the listeners who might not have come across you or your work before, what sort of stuff can they expect from you?
Right. I'm SC Vincent. I write mostly horror, fantasy, and sometimes science fiction,
Mhm.
novels, short stories, novellas. Um, so that's kind of the genre I write in, fiction, genre
Mhm.
fiction. Um, so the Sakura Element is kind of a science fiction, young adult, dystopian type world story. A lot of Jane Austen and some anime influence.
Mhm.
It's like a love story. So essentially, the plot around that is it's about Oka. She starts her first day of school in the gentry, which is kind of like the high class of the society,
Mhm.
and she's a genetically modified human. And so on her first day, she goes in and she gets immediately discriminated against by one of the other main characters, Alan Dubois. He is the son of the school's owner, and he's implemented a caste system into the school. So the top of the gentry, it kind of reflects society. So it the top of the gentry kind of look down at genetically modified humans, and so Alan bullies her. Um, and immediately she kind of has this want to get vengeance, but also to get justice for people like her.
Mhm.
So he gives her this chance to enter fencing tournaments.
Mhm.
And if she keeps winning, she gets to face him again and get her kind of honor back.
One of the things that I found interesting about the sort of plot around this book is that, firstly, I had no idea where it was going. I try not to read blurbs because I don't want to have any preconceptions about what's going to happen. But what I found interesting was the juxtaposition between the two sort of like main classes. You've got the people that are living in a very industrial area and they're kind of looked down upon, and then you've got these like elites that are at the top that get the better education. And what I found interesting was your choice of they were had like I mean, you mentioned Jane Austen being one of the influences. That was very, very clear from quite early on. And it was interesting that the narrator was almost to me spoke as part of that elite class. Um, so is that something that you sort of set out to do from the beginning? Is have like a very clear class system?
So my the big idea for writing this was that I read I read Pride and Prejudice, and I
Mm-hmm.
kind of noticed that those two characters in that book were coming from different worlds, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
One of the things that I wanted to do um, when I was coming up with an idea to write
Mm-hmm.
was that I wanted to learn how to write for different types of people.
Okay.
My previous stories were just me writing about men
Mm-hmm.
mostly, not too much about other different types of people in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of took that to like trying to write for women,
Mm-hmm.
trying to write as like in like, I don't know, in different types of ways, I
Yeah.
guess you could say.
Hmm.
And so I was putting class systems. I was
Hmm.
putting kind of how different people would think about it would affect them and how they would respond to it.
What was like the jumping off point for you in terms of developing this storyline?
Developing that storyline with a different class system,
Hmm.
it was part of the very beginning. I
Mm.
knew that I wanted to kind of have somebody who um, could be uh, kind of at the bottom and kind
Yeah.
of fight their way to the top.
Hmm.
And at the same time, I wanted to have somebody who was at the top and kind
Mm.
of have themselves get to the very bottom. And
Mm.
if I was, because that way I could tell a story, it would feature both aspects of the
Yeah.
world,
Hmm.
from that kind of poverty to the
Hmm.
show the positives and the negatives of each side of the world, and see how
Hmm.
like they're not supposed to be, they're supposed, the society is set up so they're not supposed to be together at all.
Yeah.
Upward mobility in
Hmm.
this world is extremely difficult.
Yeah.
Um, it's designed that way.
Hmm.
But because these people kind of have the personalities and the character to um, fight, and to
Yeah.
for whatever honor or justice they have, they
Hmm.
meet each other in the middle, and
Mm.
that's kind of what I wanted to tell a story about was
Yeah.
um, people in real life as well needing to walk in each other's shoes for a little bit,
Mm.
and if they do that, they can maybe find some sort of peace or love, and that's what Oka and Alan
Hmm.
do because it's a romance story.
Yeah, because it took me a minute to figure out that that was the um, sort of the backbone of the story because they do go on very kind of separate journeys, and you think like these two are just going to hate each other forever. And then when you see that sort of develop through the story, it's interesting to see them kind of like, oh, hang on a minute, we kind of want the same thing, and maybe it's just better if we stop fighting each other. And I kind of got that from your acknowledgement at the beginning of the book as well. So it's for those who yearn for love, understanding, and acceptance. May you find it in peace. And then after reading it, I was like, I get it. I get it. And it's nice. And I can tell that you, I mean, I might be wrong, but I feel like you are a bit of a romantic. You've got a bit of a wistful romance head on your shoulders. And I think that's really sweet. And you can tell that you were sort of experimenting with those different points of view as well, because it is hard to write from the perspective of someone that is just not you. Especially if you're trying to represent something that's real and from real life. So was I know we talked before the beginning of the recording, but I know that you've got influences from like Japanese culture, and I don't know if it's Japanese pop culture or culture in general. Is that something that you've always been interested in? Because it's obviously crept into the storytelling in this particular book.
Yeah, ever since I was a kid, that kind of stuff was I was I was watching anime as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
I would go home from school, I'd watch something, like Dragon Ball,
Mm-hmm.
and the type of things that I would watch would grow later on until it's not only just to watch anime, but also to kind of read about like different types of storytelling,
Mm-hmm.
the kind of stuff that they write about and the different art styles that they have, the different
Mm-hmm.
art pieces, a different aesthetic, and a kind of a different way to think about the world. So that's kind of one of the things that I liked about the Japanese kind of influence was that they have a different perspective on life and
Mm-hmm.
storytelling. Um, you can kind of look at it in a way of if you look at American comics
Mm-hmm.
versus the Japanese comics. American comics, you have Superman, and he kind of he goes on and on forever.
Mm-hmm.
That story just keeps getting rebooted, and there's
Mm-hmm.
really not most of it's not really worth reading. It's just kind of a filler each month to get a new story out. But a lot of those other stories in Japan that come out, it's a one and done.
Interesting.
These guys are trying to make um, a worthwhile story, something that matters, and
Mm-hmm.
it's just that author's piece. They write it and they draw it,
Oh,
and
I didn't know that.
it's personal, and then it's done,
Mm-hmm.
and that represents them forever. Whereas it's so fragmented in the states where they separate each part of the
Mm.
process. Um, now it's still good. It can still be good, but for me, it's just a different type of storytelling, a different type of
Yeah.
art style. Um, so I always took that kind of personal um, kind of narrative style that is offered, a different way to look at the world from Japan, and put it
Mm-hmm.
in. And it was a definite influence, especially on this book.
So, do you see yourself as trying to create a sort of a story in its own little terrarium, and then that's where it lives, rather than doing like a series of 10 books that has a storyline for a long time, or do you kind of like both as a novel writer?
You know, as a novel writer, so it's kind of a double-edged sword
Mm.
because if you because the popular thing to do, the way to make money is to do series.
Okay.
Um, that's what people want. They want to invest. There's two things people want to invest in. They want
Mm-hmm.
to invest in the author, and to do that, they also want to invest in the series.
Okay.
Um, and so when I first started with this book right here.
Mm-hmm.
It's I might be mirrored or something. The
It's
image.
showing correct. It's the Arcadian
Oh,
Destiny for
okay,
anyone that's
yeah,
listening to this on
the
Spotify.
Arcadian Destiny. Um, so this book took me like 4 years to write because I kept
Mm-hmm.
rewriting it. I didn't know what I was doing. I never really written a novel, like a real novel before.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I had written so much material and rewritten it so much several times. But I knew some of my limits, and I knew
Mm.
that uh, I needed to focus on one story, get it right, or at least decent enough to get it out there.
Mm-hmm.
So the struggle for me has been to write novels um, that are good enough to stand alone.
Mm.
And if I get to a point where I can write a novel that's a story that's good enough to last several books,
Mm-hmm.
if my writing quality can get to that point, then
Mm.
I will get to doing a series. If I can have a story that justifies doing a series.
Interesting.
Um,
Okay.
so for me, it's like not really about the money, because I don't think anybody really gets into writing books for money, because most people don't make their money back at all.
Not if
Yeah,
they've really looked into it properly. They don't.
most people are not, Stephen King or whatever.
Yeah.
They don't make, even self-published authors don't make the money back. Most of them,
Mm-hmm.
even a lot of the traditionally published authors don't make a lot of money
Mm-hmm.
either.
Yeah.
Um, so so I think what I'm coming out with now,
Mm-hmm.
my next book will be a series,
Okay.
and it'll be a horror series.
Cool.
Um, it'll be a novella series, and so because it's a story that the first book is very going to be very like one solid story, but it's
Okay.
open for more. And I've kind
Mm-hmm.
of already written out in my head and kind of on Word documents where it's going to go from here and how it's going to end.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how it goes. So mostly, yeah, I've just been writing individual
Mm-hmm.
stories, but I mean, where I'm going now, it's like I've gotten better as a writer over the years because I've been writing since I think maybe since 2020, probably
Yeah.
2018. I've been writing,
Mm-hmm.
published maybe in 2020.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I've been going on. It's 2025 now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it's been a couple years.
Yeah. So I suppose the experiences that you're having, and as you're developing as a writer, hopefully you'll feel at the point where you have to decide whether or not something is going to be a series, you'll feel confident that, from your perspective, that it's a story worth telling. Is what it
Right.
sounds like. So I suppose if you've got this like one sort of silo of a book where it sort of starts and ends in this one space, you can feel confident as well that it's to completion. It's not something that's left open ended that you're like, oh, I don't know if this is ever going to end. because that's what I've seen with a few sort of writers, not necessarily ones that I've interviewed, but that they just kind of keep kicking the can down the road until they run out of road, and then they're just still kicking it. I mean, it's not the same for everybody, but yeah, it's interesting that you take the perspective of it needs to be a story worth telling. Otherwise, I'm not going to make it more than one book.
Yeah, because I mean, it just doesn't make any. It just doesn't make sense. I mean, I could take.
Mm.
I mean, I could take this book. I could cut
Mm-hmm.
it in half, and that would be a series, I guess you could say. But yeah, I mean, it has to be. It has to be worth putting my name on it.
Yeah,
I
I
have to be.
understand
I
that.
have to. Yeah, I have to think. Be proud of. Because to me, it's like art. So
It
it's
is
like
art.
it's part of my. It might sound goofy, but it's my part of my soul, like my
Mm-hmm.
heart
It's not goofy.
on a book.
Mm-hmm.
It's out there, and it's like I want to be proud of what I'm putting out there.
And so you should be. And seriously, it's not goofy. I've said it 1,000 times already on this show. Is that one of the most vulnerable things you can do as an artist is let people look at it, let people look at your art. And the fact that writers, like, a lot of their shtick, especially if they're putting it out there, is that they're going, invest hours and hours and hours of time in this world I've created, and please don't be mean. Because it's hard, and it's hard to get people to read a book, and it's like hard when somebody has invested time in reading your book and then they come back and they go, why did you bother doing this? um so it's a vulnerable place to put yourself in, and it is a piece of you, because when you tell a story, whether you like it or not, it's full of your life's influences. If you put a prompt in front of everybody, and we've seen this time and time again, we're all going to write a completely different story because we've all had different experiences. We've all gotten to this point in a different way. We've taken a different journey, and what comes out at the end of it is going to look totally, totally different. So yeah, it's not goofy to care about something and to let people enjoy it. So one thing I did want to ask you about something in the Sakura Element is that there is a lot of fencing. It's a huge amount of fencing in the book. Is it something that you have done as a person, or is it something that you've like heavily researched? Because I couldn't tell whether or not like you were a fencer. I don't know if that's the right term. A fencist?
No, I made it all up.
You made it all up.
Yeah, so I did a lot of research
Uh
into
huh.
fencing.
Mm-hmm.
I read instructions,
Mm-hmm.
rules,
Mm-hmm.
different types of fencing, different types of swords, you could call them,
Mm-hmm.
that you do. I watched countless videos. And so I
Mm-hmm.
did the research, and I
Yeah.
realized I, for me, at least in my skill level and talent and the story I
Mm-hmm.
wanted to tell, I could
Mm-hmm.
not do a realistic fencing storytelling the way
Okay.
that I wanted to do it
Okay.
with the story I was writing, because
Okay.
fencing has a lot more rules, has a lot more regulations, and I
Mm.
needed more flexibility with
Mm. Okay.
uh, the story I was telling.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so in the book, um, there's kind of a book of rules that they talk about,
Yeah.
and I try to explain it in there, and it's called um, fencing rules for the new world or something.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's something like that, and that's kind of how. So basically, that's kind of the meta way I explained of why fencing is different in
Okay.
the Sakura Element compared to us,
Mm-hmm.
because simply it's just like any sport. There's tons of rules, and
Mm-hmm.
there's tons of. It's not as exciting as you might think. So I had to make it more dynamic,
Okay.
and a little bit easier for me and the reader to follow, because to do a little self-criticism, I'm someone, my writing can be very literal and
Mm-hmm.
very um, like descriptive. So I do a lot of telling and not showing,
Mm.
which is, for me, I need to get a little bit better at showing and not telling. So that was one of the criticisms that I received for their sword fights.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but honestly, if I hadn't made it so less realistic, it would have
Yeah.
been, I think it would have been unreadable. So I had to kind of make up I had to edit it, like make up the whole fencing thing. So I've never
Oh, that
had
makes
any
sense.
fencing. I never had any fencing experience. I've
Mm-hmm.
seen it in the Olympics
Mm-hmm.
before this, but I thought it was. I really correlated it with something that was high class, something, and
Yeah.
that's what it was. Because back when higher like people in France and high class people would settle scores, it was
Mm-hmm.
fencing battles. So I kind of took that and brought it into this story as well. So that's how I settled on it.
That makes a lot of sense actually, because granted, I tried fencing when I was at school. I didn't go to a posh school. Just gonna say they just had a fencing club. It was like an all girls school, so they're like, we can do stuff that boys can do. So we weren't allowed to like learn how to cook, but we had to study like weird science stuff and computery things, and also fencing for some reason. But I never like understood the rules, and there were so many rules I got bored, which is why I didn't know the difference. But I think it's good because it is such a heavily used tool, not in a negative way, but within the book for people settling their issues. It's like I challenge you. Whoever wins is the best, and it was very much like a you could I don't know. It was interesting to see the characters developing their skills, and then that kind of helped them to climb this ladder, as you were talking about earlier, where they're sort of trying to level out and find each other on the same plane. So it was just interesting. I was curious, more nosy than anything. I was just curious if you were a fencing master, like a secret fencist. I still
No,
don't know what the word is. Sword fighter. I don't know. Um, so, so that I don't keep rambling about fencists, because I'm so sure that the more I say it, the more offensive it sounds. Um, I know that you are currently in the querying trenches at the moment. Um, I think you said previously when we've spoken outside of this conversation that you had queried before, and then self-published, and now you're going back to querying again. Firstly, why have you decided to query, and how's it going?
so I've decided to query. It's always kind of been my dream, and I think a lot of authors have this dream is to have like the big five, publish them, and they get an agent, they get published. They have an editor, and everything goes amazingly, and it gets on the bookshelves and things like that. So of course, ever since I was a kid, I love reading books, and that's kind of been part of this dream too. So of course, I'm gonna try it. Um, so I've done this before. I have like three books
Mm-hmm.
kind of out right now. I did the same thing with them. I queried them, and then when it didn't go anywhere, I just self-published it because we live in a world where, um, there's no real gatekeeping anymore,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a good thing and a bad thing.
Mm-hmm.
There's some, you can get like you talked about. There's some more experimental books at the beginning, like my own, that kind of
Mm-hmm.
merge genres and things that would never have happened before to
Yeah.
get to come out.
Mm-hmm.
But maybe sometimes the things that shouldn't have come out do come out now. And there's kind of some quality issues. And I'm not saying my books are perfect either. I'm sure there's I know there's quality issues probably with my books too. So that's just but that's kind of what agents are in some
Mm-hmm.
ways, is that they're kind of gatekeepers, and you could
Mm-hmm.
think of them as gatekeepers for quality, but just for also the types of books they want
Mm-hmm.
published. Um,
Yeah.
so for me, I'm kind of chasing that dragon in a way, but not, I think this next time is probably going to be the last time or this time is going to be probably the last time I try to do the traditional published way
Okay.
for a novel. For
Mm-hmm.
short stories, I don't seem to be having as much problems.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because I recently signed another publishing deal for a short story. Um,
Congratulations. That's awesome.
thank, thank you. Um, but in terms of the querying process for the novella series that I'm
Yeah.
trying to do right now, like I said before, it's a horror series. It's called Blessings of the Damned.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's about I think a little bit. It's about a priest who goes. It takes place in the as like during the cowboy era, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where he goes out there and he's told by the Catholic Church to go to America, because Lincoln is saying, we're about to go to a civil war,
Mm-hmm.
and however we got a massive vampire army that's gonna come out and
Mm-hmm.
kind of attack us, and it's gonna kill everybody.
Mm-hmm.
It's gonna ruin the entire country. So he needs to go out there and solve the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that's kind of like the very kind of beginning of
Yeah.
that story. Um, so I've had queried about like 60 something agents. Probably
That
not a good
sounds about
idea.
right.
It's not. It's probably not a good idea to query that many people at once. Um, but the thing is like the hard part about querying is that you don't get feedback.
Mm.
Sometimes, rarely, you'll get some sort of feedback, and most of the time you get just a form rejection,
Yeah.
which makes it extremely difficult to change maybe it's just your approach. Maybe you just need to
Mm.
refine your query letter. They don't tell you. They just um, they just give you a form
Mm.
rejection letter. So that's probably one of the hardest aspects of
Mm-hmm.
querying is that unless you get an agent who takes time out of their day to give you some sort of feedback. Maybe there's a flaw or something in your story that they don't like.
Yeah.
That could help you, but they don't tell you. Or it's just, your query letter, you need to work on this, do something like this. And then, but the lack of feedback is probably one of the hardest parts of doing the traditional querying um,
Yeah.
route. So,
Yeah, I've definitely heard that from a lot of writers. Because how are you supposed to know what you're doing is wrong because you need to change something, or is it because the market isn't right for you right now? Because that's part of the problem, isn't it? Is how easy will it be for that agent to? I'm not an expert, by the way. I just like to point that out. And if I say anything wrong, then I'm sorry. It's just my perception of what's going on. But it seems that if the agent doesn't feel like they're going to be able to sell the book, then why would they take you on? So if there's not a market for that, like you might find that in a few months' time there is going to be a larger market for vampire-based books because of the new Nosferatu film that came out. So it might be that pushes it forward. And fantasy books have had a massive leap, and so have romantasy and dark fantasy books because they've become really big on like social media platforms and stuff. So you might find that a trend floats your way and all of a sudden you're like at the top of the pile because it fits in with the thing that they could sell the easiest. So it must be really tough. And I think the two biggest complaints slash difficulties that I've seen people have are not knowing whether or not is it me or you, and also waiting. Like there's a huge wait because it's
uh,
oversaturated. Because everyone's writing a book. Like that's not a joke. Everyone's writing a book. It's not we're not special because we're writing something.
I
um,
received I
you know.
received a rejection, I
Mm-hmm.
think, for the Sakura Element
Okay.
just yesterday. And this was a submission that I put out. I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and I just received a rejection for it.
That
And
was
as
quick.
I already self-published it last year. Um,
That's
so
wild.
I mean these it's yeah, I mean the waiting is killer.
Yeah.
So you know, I would say that you gotta have patience with it.
Mm.
Um, some people are gonna read it and they're just not. Sometimes I think sometimes it's rude. Like sometimes they'll read it and they just won't reply to you. It'll be a rejection. They just
Yeah.
won't give you a reply. Um,
Yeah.
I don't know, I don't know which is worse, not getting a reply or getting a form rejection, but I would prefer a form rejection just so I can mark it off my Excel sheet.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. And then you've got your answer, and you'd have to think, or maybe it's like in um when somebody like strings you along, and they're like, "Oh yeah, this could maybe be something," and they're like, "Actually, I don't like you that much." Um, yeah, you get that. It's a hard one because I don't plan on querying because I'm impatient, and I hate rejection. It makes me deeply uncomfortable. Um, so I don't think I'm not cut out. for that life. Um, yeah, I don't think that's something I could do. I think
I
that
don't blame
writers
you.
who have the yeah, I don't blame you either. I feel like writers who have the patience to go through the querying journey have a stronger backbone than I, because I would crumble. I think I'd find it a struggle.
I mean, every day I wake up, I check my phone, I check my
Mhm,
emails
mhm,
to see if I have a rejection, not an acceptance, but a rejection.
mm.
That's how it is when you are
What a
querying.
way to start your day.
That's what I do. That's what I do. But that's how you that's what it does to you after
Yeah.
6+ years or whatever of submitting books.
Mm,
Rejection goes hand in hand with
mm,
writing, and it can wear a lot of people down.
mhm,
The good thing is that you don't have to face it like you just said you're not going to do. You
mhm,
can, like I said before, there's no gatekeeping, so you can
mhm,
do whatever you want, and there's no shame in that. There's
mhm.
nothing wrong with it at all because um, things aren't like they used to be when our parents or our grandparents were publishing.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's interesting, and I think I'm sure I've said this in other episodes, but my perception of self-publishing was largely negative until quite recently. It was something that I was like, well, initially I thought nobody can afford to self-publish, and that's not true anymore because it is far more accessible than it ever has been. Um, and partly because I was like, oh, those are just the people that got rejected from the having an agent or asking one of the big five or whatever to take them on. What I also love now is that not only are there indie writers, but there are indie publishers. So we've got these little pockets of people who really believe in storytelling, and they're like, screw the market. We like these types of books, and we want to see more of them. So they're kind of contributing to the positive change that's happened within the publishing world. And it's really fascinating to see all these little like groups of people, even if it's just a singular person, opening up these small publishing houses to facilitate people who maybe don't want to go through the stresses of like querying and doing that for however many years it takes to do it. But yeah, it's I get what you're saying, what you said earlier about there being no filter for quality necessarily. But I do think that there has got to be at least one person that likes everybody's work. Statistically speaking, there's going to be somebody that reads a book that I read and I think is terrible that goes, oh, this is the best book I've ever read, or this is the best story I've ever read, or it's resonated with me and I don't really care about the spelling mistakes. There's going to be someone. I do truly believe that. Um, yeah, it's a wild, wild world out there, and it's scary and it's dangerous, and I suppose it's going to make a lot of people stronger.
Yeah.
Yeah, or stop them from doing it altogether. It's going to do one or the other. So in terms of you self-publishing, I know previously we've said one of the biggest challenges is marketing, because you're really not just selling a book, you're selling you and a brand, which is nuts in itself. What's your experience been like with the self-publishing world?
In terms of the self-publishing world and as a brand, it's it's very difficult. Um, you have to be a good public speaker. Um, you have to be good at marketing, social media, technology, um, building a community, being part of communities,
Mm-hmm.
being just kind of a jack of all trades.
Yeah.
And they say master of none, but you have to have some sort of ability in all those in order to be
Mm-hmm.
um, get your name out there. Um,
Yeah.
I'm not good at any of that. I don't think. I I I'm so when I first started out,
Mm-hmm.
like on Twitter, back
Mm-hmm.
when Twitter was Twitter, um, I
It still
got
is.
it still is,
It still
yeah.
is.
So I got a lot of Twitter followers. I
Mm-hmm.
had a lot of people when my first book was coming out. A lot of people interested. And then things kind of stagnate after a while. That's kind of how
Mm-hmm.
things normally go. Things get
Yeah.
big at first, and then they kind of. But
Mm-hmm.
um, you know, but I never really changed my approach. I never really evolved with the times. So
Mm.
I kind of started, okay, maybe I'll do a YouTube thing, or maybe I'll go on podcasts. So that's kind of what I've been trying to do within the last year.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of me trying to change my approach to
Mm-hmm.
kind of help get my art out more to other people.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, yeah, I mean, if you just like have one, like say you just have one Twitter or you just
Mm-hmm.
have one Instagram, and you're just speaking to people, and you also have to make sure that you're speaking to readers. So I
Yeah.
think a lot of the people I talk to, that I communicate with, are fellow writers.
Mm-hmm.
um, they're not necessarily going to be your customers.
Yeah.
Um, so that's also a flaw I think that I've had when I've kind of built my social media or my customer base, is that I'm not really marketing to buyers.
Yeah.
And that's something that I think other people who are starting their journeys in publishing can kind of focus on, and also don't uh, don't turn down, don't put away the in-person approach.
Mm.
If you have that personality and that ability to do the in-person sales pitch,
Mm-hmm.
definitely use that. Go to book fairs, go to any type of like marketplace that you can go to,
Mm-hmm.
and you'll start off small at first, but you'll get. I mean, I've seen people on Twitter post pictures of themselves and say, "Hey, I sold 14 books,
Mm-hmm.
hard copy books,
Mm-hmm.
um, for full price," and
Yeah.
that is, you get way more money just in terms of business from doing it that way,
Mm.
than you do it like a digital copy. You get way more of an audience too, because there's an in-person kind of connection that you make
Yeah.
with that
Mm-hmm.
audience. And so if you give them like a bookmark with your handles or whatever, and they read your book because they met you in real person, they bought it from you in real life, they're going to follow you and they're going to be very responsive. So
Yeah.
um, I've sold books, but a lot of those books that I've sold, people don't necessarily read them.
Mm.
You can sell books, um, but the thing that you want is people to read them and to give you kind of feedback, or to give
Yeah.
you a review, to give you something, to kind of keep you going. Because as an artist, what you're looking for is uh, kind of nourishment. Not nourishment is the connection
Mm.
with other people. It's to
Yeah.
kind of say what you're saying, what you're trying to do, has
Mm-hmm.
connected in a meaningful way with somebody else. So
Yeah.
that's kind of, I think, a good way to go about doing that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's interesting that you say that a lot of the sort of ecosystem that you've built around your social media and your online contact with people is that it becomes very insular, because all of us are writing and we're all part of the struggle, and we're all finding our feet and trying to figure out what works for us, and it works completely different for each person. That you kind of do get stuck, especially with the way that the algorithms work, in that bubble, and it's really hard to break into that part where you find the people that actually want to consume the books, because we'll all help each other out, and there are writers that support other writers by buying each other's books. It becomes this like book buying circle or whatever it may be, which is fantastic and needed, because we all need each other, I think. Especially if, like, I see the indie community as being under like one big publisher, and it's the people. um so it's just interesting to see how you have your reading community and they're in a bubble, and you've got your writing community and they're in a bubble, and there's not necessarily a gap to be bridged, because it's not often that people can break through that and connect the two. And that's something I definitely think I agree that's kind of missing, is that connection with the people that actually just want to consume books and they want nothing to do with actually writing them. Because people's interests are different. Like when you're a writer, you might read a book with a different set of eyes. Like you'll potentially read it with a more critical eye, like, oh, I wouldn't have written it like that, or that's not my style, so I'm not interested in it, or it's not going to help me grow. I'm not saying all writers read books like that, but you do have that potential for bias as well. Whereas people that are just like, just give me something to read, I love reading stuff. You're going to get a completely different type of customer. So yeah, it's interesting. I'm glad that you mentioned the in-person stuff because I think that's really important and something that we are unfortunately very swiftly moving away from is the buying a physical copy of a book or going to an actual store and pick it up and go, well, like the cover or this looks like it'll be interesting. Um, it's less tactile, and I think that's a shame. So maybe I'm hoping that for example, Barnes and Noble, I think are opening like 60 more stores up because BookTok made it work. Like they closed down loads of stores, and now because like the internet has gone nuts for reading again, they are now able to open up more stores. So maybe we'll start
Oh,
leaning the other way. We'll see. It's
maybe they'll
interesting.
start. Maybe they'll start carrying more self-published writers because
I'm gonna petition it.
they don't typically carry in store
Mm-hmm.
self-published writers. It's very difficult to get that done. Um,
Yeah.
so maybe they'll be a little bit more loose next time around.
Yeah, I think so. I know that, and this is word of mouth. I don't have proof for this, so don't come for me, Barnes and Noble. But I've heard that it's very difficult to get if you're with like KDP, for example. I think you have like exclusivity issues, but also, um, some of the larger book chains won't touch books that have been printed through Amazon. Um, which I get, but it also makes it restrictive for other people. So then it creates a whole other set of problems. But that's something I've picked up. I don't know if that's necessarily true, but
That's true.
it'd be interesting to see how this all goes as the physical bookshops hopefully become more prevalent. Um, it'd be cool to try and get more indie books in libraries too. I think that'd be nice.
It's actually probably easier to get them in libraries than it is
Mm.
to get it into Barnes and Noble.
Mm-hmm.
Libraries, especially if you're friends with the librarian and you set
Mm-hmm.
up your book, I don't think that they get them. I think they still have an aversion to
Mm-hmm.
Amazon, but for if you've done something with Ingram Spark
Mm-hmm.
and you've set it up correctly, you
Mm-hmm.
might have a better chance at it.
Interesting.
Yeah, so because with Ingram as just a distributor, there's no exclusivity type situation there.
Okay.
Um, it costs more to do it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if you publish with Ingram Spark or a distributor like that,
Mm-hmm.
but you do have a bit more freedom.
Mm-hmm.
But I find that if you're more focusing on like a digital store,
Mm-hmm.
um, and you kind of have a budget, Amazon's probably your better way because it has if you're buying a book, you're most likely going to go to Amazon.com,
Yeah.
right? That's where the customers are, and they're going to be going there, not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily. It's I don't know. It's kind of hard to if you think about it. If someone's going to go um, to look for an indie book or self-published book, they're not gonna think to go to Barnes and Noble and get it there physically in
Mm-hmm.
store. They would think to go to Amazon or something. But
Yeah.
hopefully things can change. That's what I would like.
That'd be nice. So if anyone from the Barnes and Noble CEO team wanna help out with that, I'm into it. I've got free time. We can talk about it.
Yeah,
Let's try and make this different. Um, it's one of those things where I hate having to support a huge conglomerate, but also if that's the only choice or the only accessible choice for people to use, of course they're going to use it, and they kind of cornered the market really because they are like one of the first things that you'll think of when you're thinking about I want to support a self-published author because it is so accessible. There's no like having to spend like $1,000 on getting a few books printed in the hopes that you might sell them. The print on
right.
demand services are good. I mean, they're good in the sense of like being accessible, quality wise, not necessarily very good. That's a whole other thing. But yeah, went off on a little bit of a tangent, but I think it's interesting. I think it's very interesting, especially to hear people's different perspectives of how this whole system works because it is fantastic, but it's also terrible. So there's no like. I think if something is really really good for a huge amount of people, there's got to be something bad about it.
Right,
That might be
right.
my cynicism poking out, but Anyway, before we go, I know you had a physical copy of your first book. Do you have physical copies of your other books as well?
Yeah, I do. Thanks for asking.
Can I see them?
Yes.
I want to see them. It makes me so
So
excited when people can hold them and look at them.
yeah, so this was like I showed you this was my
Hmm.
first book. I have copies of all my books.
Hmm.
Put it on my shelf. It's a little bit of um, vanity, but I like to keep them there. Then so that was the Arcadian Destiny. That was my first book.
Hmm.
Came out in like 2020. Kind of your basic hero's journey
Mm.
story. This one is East the Fallen.
It's
Uh,
got a cool ass dragon on the front.
yeah, that's probably why it's my best-selling book. Honestly, if you can get yourself a good cover,
Mm.
it can sell you books just by
Yeah.
itself.
Hmm.
I had no idea it'd be that good of a cover when I got it,
It's
but
sick.
yeah, thank you. This one, it's more of it's a high fantasy, but it's more
Hmm.
inspired by King Arthurian.
Arthur.
Yeah, Arthur. Your accent is much better than mine.
That's okay.
It's inspired by that, inspired by
Hmm.
kind of biblical lore as well.
Okay.
A lot of action, a little bit of romance in there. It's a novella, as you know, kind of talked
Hmm.
about the novella stuff I'm coming out with soon.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, this is also my cheapest book because it's a novella.
Hmm.
Because I try to, an interesting thing is I try to kind of price them in comparative how much it would like take to make the book. Like
Yeah. Hmm.
I if a book's 100 pages, I'll sell it cheaper than
Yeah,
if
that
a
makes
book
sense.
is 400 pages. It's gonna be like $12. If it's a
Hmm.
novella, it's gonna be like $10, I
Yeah,
think.
that makes sense.
And then this is my first kind of hardcover, the Sakura Element.
Hmm.
Um, so this is actually the first one that I had the cover art custom made. I hired an artist.
Hmm.
Um, I had the whole thing done.
Yeah, it looks really cool.
Yeah, thank you.
You're
Um,
welcome.
and the whole formatting, everything, I've kind of become
Uh-huh.
I've become very particular about kind of how formatting works and how the insides of the book works because of
Hmm.
I've been self-publishing, so I pay a lot
Hmm.
of attention to that, and I know
Hmm.
that I've become very blurry. So sorry about
That's
that.
okay.
Trying to
That's
fix the
part of the
focus.
puzzle. It
Okay,
happens. It happens. It just wanted to look at the books, I think.
right.
It's now got book vision and it can't understand that there's a person. It's okay. We'll maybe I'll do some effects or something. But no, I think when you spend that much time writing something, you really should care about the entire thing because as you said, like a cover can make or break whether or not somebody's interested in reading a book. And sometimes, people's experience with an author can sort of override that and it's totally fine. But unfortunately, people do look. You look at the cover first. That's what happens. So I think, yeah, I can see why people want to read the dragon book because it's
Yep.
dragons and people like dragons. So yeah, but yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. It's really awesome. I'm always nosy, and I like seeing people's physical books. And also, you may think that it's vanity, but you achieved something, and that's cool. So they're actually trophies. I'm here to tell
Thank
you
you.
they're trophies. You've won the trophy. You managed to get a book out, and that's more than most people can do. So it's amazing. Um, Thank you so much for joining me today. It's been really interesting to find out your processes and to learn more about you as a writer. Um, Before I let you leave, please can you tell our listeners where they can find you and your work?
So probably the best way to follow me to keep up with me is just on X or Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
Just the handle is at scvincent4,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm sure you'll put some links in the
I
description
will.
or something like
Mm-hmm.
that. Be very appreciated. Thank you so much for your
Thanks.
time and being patient with me. Thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome. And it's not a matter of patience. You're a human being, and that's how it works. We'll have different ways of navigating the world. So, yeah, I will put the links on in the description for your Twitter and also where people can buy your books as well. And if you're interested in looking at S.C. Vincent's author feature on Indiosyncrasy, I will be putting that link on the description as well. But yeah, thank you so much, and I'll catch you later.
Thank you.